Captain Jiwan gripped the arms of her command chair as another explosion rocked the Soul's Pride. The lights flickered, and she could hear the hull groaning under the stress. Through the main view screen, she watched red plasma bolts streak past, like angry stars. "Minho, status report!" she called to her tactical officer. Lieutenant Minho's fingers danced across his console. "3 Vorthak cruisers closing fast, Captain. Their lead ship is charging weapons for another volley." Jiwan nodded grimly. The Vorthak were tough fighters, but her crew was tougher. "Return fire! Target their engines!" The Soul's Pride shuddered as its main guns fired. Blue energy beams lanced out toward the alien ships. One beam struck home, and a Vorthak cruiser spun out of control, trailing sparks and atmosphere. "Good shot," Jiwan said, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more enemy ships were moving to flank them. At the communications station, Officer Nari looked worried. "Captain, I'm losing contact with the rest of our fleet. Something is jamming our signals." "Keep trying," Jiwan ordered. She turned to look at the planet below them. Kepler 442c looked dead and brown, like an old piece of fruit. The science teams had said there was nothing down there except rocks and dust. So why were the Vorthak so interested in this empty world? Engineer Do-hyun's voice crackled over the intercom. "Captain, engines are running hot. We can't keep this pace much longer." Another volley of plasma fire lit up the space around them. This time, one bolt hit their starboard side. The ship lurched, and Jiwan had to grab her chair to keep from falling. "Hull breach on Deck 7, reported sensor operator Hana. "Emergency teams are sealing it now." Jiwan watched as a human frigate exploded in a ball of white fire. The crew of 300 was gone in an instant. Her jaw tightened. These Vorthak raiders had picked the wrong system to attack. "Minho, lock onto their command ship. Full spread of torpedoes." "Torpedoes away, Captain." The missiles streaked toward the largest Vorthak vessel. Its point defense guns tried to stop them, but 3 torpedoes got through. The explosions rippled along the alien ship's hull, tearing huge chunks of metal into space. But the enemy wasn't finished. More ships were jumping into the system. Jiwan counted at least 6 new contacts on the scanner. "Where did they all come from?" Nari muttered. The battle was getting worse by the minute. Human ships were outnumbered 3-1. Jiwan watched helplessly as another destroyer took a direct hit and started falling toward the planet. "Captain," Hana called out. "I'm reading some strange energy spikes from the planet's surface." "What kind of spikes?" "I'm not sure. They started about 10 minutes ago, right after the Daejeon crashed into the northern continent." Jiwan frowned. The Daejeon had been one of their escort ships. Its wreckage had hit the planet like a giant meteor. But energy readings from a dead world didn't make sense. "Probably just interference from all the weapons fire," she said. "Keep monitoring it." The Soul's Pride shook again as enemy fire found its mark. This time, the lights went out completely for several seconds before the emergency power kicked in. "Direct hit to our main reactor," Do-hyun reported. "We're down to 60% power." Things were looking bad. Half the human fleet was destroyed or disabled. The Vorthak were pressing their advantage, moving in for the kill. Then something unexpected happened. The largest Vorthak ship, a massive dreadnought that had been hanging back from the fight, suddenly exploded. Not from human weapons, but from some kind of internal failure. The explosion was so bright that the view screen automatically dimmed to protect their eyes. "What happened to it?" Minho asked, staring at the expanding cloud of debris. "I don't know," Jiwan replied, "but I'm not complaining." The destruction of their flagship confused the remaining Vorthak ships. They started pulling back, no longer sure of their victory. But Jiwan's attention was drawn to something else. The wreckage from the dreadnought was falling toward the planet, burning up in the atmosphere like 1,000 shooting stars. Most of it would burn up completely, but the larger pieces would hit the surface. "Hana, are you still getting those energy readings?" The sensor operator nodded. "Yes, Captain, and they're getting stronger, much stronger." Jiwan stared at the brown planet spinning slowly below them. What was down there? The science reports had all said the same thing. Kepler 442c was dead. No life signs, no technology, no signs of civilization. Just rocks and ancient formations that looked natural. But those energy readings suggested otherwise. A new voice came over the comm system. It was Admiral Park from the Fleet Command ship. "All units, Fall back to rally point 7. Repeat. All units fall back. Ji-won was relieved to hear that the Admiral was still alive. You heard the Admiral. Minho, plot a course away from the planet. As the Soul's Pride began to turn away from Kepler 442c, Ji-won took one last look at the world below. The Vorthak wreckage was still falling like rain, creating bright streaks across the dark side of the planet. Something was happening down there. She could feel it in her bones. Those energy readings weren't just interference. They were something else. Something that had been sleeping and was now starting to wake up. Captain, Hana said quietly, those energy readings just doubled in strength. Ji-won nodded slowly. Whatever was down on that planet, the battle had disturbed it. Pieces of burning ships had been raining down for the past hour, hitting the surface like bombs. As they moved away from the planet, more human ships joined them. The survivors of the fleet were battered and bloody, but they were alive. The Vorthak had withdrawn to the outer system, licking their wounds. But Ji-won couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle was just beginning. Something ancient was stirring on the world below, and she doubted it would be happy about being awakened by falling starships. The Soul's Pride limped away from Kepler 442c, its hull scarred by enemy fire. Behind them, the planet continued to spin in the darkness while deep beneath its surface, things that had slept for thousands of years began to stir. Energy readings continued to climb on the sensors, but by then they were too far away to investigate. Whatever was happening on that dead world would have to wait, but not for long. Deep beneath the surface of Kepler 442c, in chambers that had been dark for 50,000 years, ancient systems began to wake up. The first tremor shook dust from walls that had not moved since before humans discovered fire. Emergency lights flickered on, casting red shadows across corridors built for beings much taller than any current galactic species. In the deepest chamber of all, something opened its eyes. Korath had been sleeping for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to be awake. His body was no longer fully organic. Over the millennia, his people had replaced failing parts with technology, merging flesh and machine until the line between them disappeared. He sat up slowly, joints creaking like old hinges. Around him, status displays came to life, showing the state of the facility he had been built to guard. Most of the readouts were red. Warning signals flashed across every screen. The seals were breaking. Korath stood on legs that felt strange after so much time asleep. He was nearly 3 meters tall, with skin that looked like polished metal. Cables and wires ran along his arms like veins, connecting to interfaces built into his palms. He walked to the main control panel and pressed his hand against the scanner. Information flooded into his mind instantly. The surface above had been bombarded with debris from some kind of space battle. The impacts had cracked the outer barriers and disrupted power systems throughout the complex. But that wasn't the worst news. In the center of the facility, something else was waking up, something that should never wake up again. Korath accessed the central monitoring system and felt his artificial heart skip a beat. The containment field around the deepest chamber was failing. Energy levels that should have remained stable for another 1,000 years were fluctuating wildly. The eternal sleeper was stirring. Korath had been created for one purpose: to guard the prison of the most dangerous being his people had ever encountered. The creature sleeping in the depths had nearly destroyed the galaxy once before. It had taken the sacrifice of his entire civilization to stop it and put it to sleep. Now, because of some primitive space battle above, that ancient evil was beginning to wake. Far above, on the planet's surface, other things were happening. Sergeant Kyung crouched behind a ridge of black rock, watching his scanner for signs of movement. His squad had been sent down to establish a forward base while the fleet regrouped. It was supposed to be a simple mission, on a dead planet. But nothing about this place felt dead. "Sunho, what are you getting on the deep scan?" he asked his communications specialist. Private Sunho shook his head, frowning at his equipment. "It's weird, Sergeant. I'm picking up electromagnetic signatures from underground, big ones, but they're not showing up on the geological scanner." Medic. Gina knelt beside them, checking her own instruments. "The local wildlife is acting strange, too." "What wildlife?" Kyung asked. "The briefing said this place was lifeless." "That's just it," Gina replied. "There are small creatures here. Insects? Some kind of lizards. But they're all moving away from our landing zone, like they're running from something. Kyung stood up and looked around. The landscape was mostly barren, with strange rock formations rising like ancient towers. The science teams had said these were natural geological features, carved by wind and time. But now, looking at them more carefully, Kyung wasn't so sure. Some of those formations looked almost like buildings. Old, weathered buildings that might once have been part of a city. "Sir," called out Private Doki from his position near the landing shuttles, "our equipment is acting up. The portable generators keep fluctuating, and the comm gear is picking up interference." Kyung walked over to investigate. The interference was coming from underground, just like Sunho had said, but it was getting stronger by the hour. "Pack up the gear," he decided. "We're moving to higher ground." As his squad gathered their equipment, Kyung noticed something else strange. The rock formations around them were starting to glow very faintly. It was barely visible in the daylight, but it was there. Several kilometers away, their equipment wasn't the only thing experiencing problems. Deep in the underground facility, Korath was fighting a losing battle against failing systems. The space battle above had done more damage than he first realized. Critical power conduits had been severed by the seismic activity. Backup systems that should have lasted forever were burning out one by one. Worse, the Eternal Sleeper was responding to the chaos. The creature fed on conflict and destruction. The battle in space had been like a dinner bell, calling it back to consciousness. Korath accessed the facility's external sensors and was surprised to find life signs on the surface. The primitive species from the space battle had landed exploration teams. They were setting up some kind of base directly above the containment area. He tried to access their communication systems to warn them, but their technology was too different from his own. The best he could do was cause interference, making their equipment malfunction. It wasn't enough. They needed to leave, all of them. Korath made a decision that went against 50,000 years of protocol. He began powering up the facility's active defense systems. They had been designed to keep intruders out, but they had never been used against living beings. The ancient guardian hesitated. His programming told him to protect all sentient life. But if these creatures stayed here much longer, they would die anyway. When the Eternal Sleeper fully awakened, nothing on the planet's surface would survive. On the surface, Sergeant Kyung was leading his squad toward a ridgeline when their equipment started going crazy. Radios squealed with feedback. Scanners showed readings that made no sense. The portable generators began cycling on and off by themselves. "What's happening?" Private Doki shouted over the electronic noise. Before anyone could answer, their own weapons turned against them. The smart rifles they carried suddenly swiveled in their hands, trying to target their owners. The soldiers dropped them quickly, but their sidearms started activating too. "EMP burst!" Kyung yelled. "Some kind of electromagnetic attack!" But it wasn't an EMP. Down below, Korath was carefully hacking into their systems, trying to force them to leave without hurting them. He had learned their language from their radio transmissions and understood that they were just explorers, not invaders. The squad took shelter in one of the rock formations, which turned out to be the entrance to an ancient structure. As they moved inside, their equipment stopped malfunctioning. "Look at this place," Gina whispered. The walls around them were covered in symbols and pictures. They showed tall beings with elongated faces and multiple arms. The artwork was incredibly detailed, carved directly into stone that seemed to shimmer with its own light. "These aren't natural formations," Sunho said. "This is architecture. Really old architecture." Kyung nodded grimly. "Command needs to know about this." "Gina, can you get a message through to the ship?" The medic tried her communicator, but got only static. "Something is still jamming our signals." Deep underground, Korath watched the humans through his sensors. They were inside his facility now, in the outer chambers that had once been a city. His people had built this place as both a prison and a monument, a reminder of what they had sacrificed to save the galaxy. The humans seemed curious rather than hostile. They were studying the artwork, trying to understand what they had found. Under different circumstances, Korath might have been pleased to meet another intelligent species, but there was no time for first contact protocols. In the deepest chamber, the Eternal Sleeper was beginning to move. Containment field strength had dropped to 60% and falling. At 50%, the creature would be able to influence minds on the surface. At 30%, it could start reshaping reality itself, and at 0%, it would be free to destroy everything it touched. Korath began preparing for the worst. If the humans wouldn't leave on their own, he would have to make them understand the danger they were all in. The ancient guardian activated the facility's translation protocols and began composing a message. It was time to break 50,000 years of silence. The walls began to glow brighter as Sergeant Kyung's squad moved deeper into the ancient structure. The strange symbols seemed to pulse with their own light, and the air felt thick with energy that made their skin tingle. "Sergeant," Private Sun Ho whispered, "my scanner is picking up massive power sources below us. Whatever this place is, it's still active." Kyung nodded, keeping his hand near his sidearm even though their weapons had proven unreliable. The deeper they went, the more obvious it became that this wasn't just some old ruin. This was technology, beyond anything humanity had ever seen. The corridor opened into a vast chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with power. In the center stood a platform covered in controls that responded to their presence by lighting up in complex patterns. "This is incredible," Medic Gina breathed. "How old do you think this is?" Before anyone could answer, the air in front of them began to shimmer. A holographic image formed, showing the tall figure of an alien being. When it spoke, the words came out in perfect Korean. "Greetings, young ones. I am Korath, guardian of the eternal prison. You must leave this place immediately." The four humans stared in shock. The figure before them was nearly 3 meters tall, with metallic skin and cables running along its arms. Its eyes glowed with a soft blue light. "You can understand us?" Kyung asked, raising his weapon despite knowing it probably wouldn't work. "I have learned your language from your communications," Korath replied, "but there is no time for proper introductions. You are in terrible danger, all of you." "What kind of danger?" Gina asked. The Guardian's expression grew grim. "Something sleeps beneath this facility. Something that destroyed my entire civilization 50,000 years ago. Your battle in space has damaged the containment systems. It is beginning to wake up." Private Doki laughed nervously. "You're talking about some kind of monster?" "Come on. Not a monster," Korath said seriously. "Something far worse. A being of pure malevolent energy that feeds on conflict and destruction. When it fully awakens, everything on this planet will die." High above in orbit, Captain Jiwon was dealing with her own problems. The Soul's Pride had managed to rejoin what was left of the human fleet, but they were still badly outnumbered by the Vorthak forces. "Captain," Communications Officer Nari reported, "we're receiving a distress signal from the surface team. Put it through." Sergeant Kyung's voice crackled over the comm system, broken up by interference. "Command, we've made contact with someone down here. An alien. It says we're all in danger." "Say again, Sergeant. Did you say alien contact?" "Affirmative." "Some kind of guardian. It's warning us about something sleeping underground, something dangerous." Before Jiwon could respond, new contacts appeared on the tactical display. More Vorthak ships were arriving, including several heavy cruisers. "Captain," Lieutenant Minho called out, "the Vorthaks are moving to attack position, but they're not targeting us." Jiwon frowned. "What are they targeting?" "The planet. They're charging orbital bombardment weapons." Down in the ancient facility, Korath suddenly stiffened. His sensors had detected the Vorthak fleet movements. "This is worse than I thought," he said to the humans. "Your enemies above seek to claim what lies below. They believe they have found a weapon." "Have they?" Kyung asked. "In a sense, yes, but not one they can control. If they damage the containment systems further, they will doom themselves along with everyone else." The Guardian turned to a control panel and began working frantically. "I must contact their ships. I must make them understand." "Can you do that?" Gina asked. "I am trying, but their communication systems are even more primitive than yours." In space, the Vorthak War Commander Thexhai studied the readings from the planet below. His science officers had detected massive energy sources beneath the surface. Energy readings that suggested technology far more advanced than anything the humans possessed. "Prepare landing forces," he ordered. "We will claim this world and its secrets." But as the Vorthak ships moved into bombardment position, their systems began experiencing the same malfunctions that had affected the human equipment. Weapons targeting systems failed. Navigation computers showed false readings. Communication arrays went dead. "What is causing this?" Thex High demanded. His tactical officer worked frantically at his console. "Unknown, War Commander. Some kind of electronic interference from the planet." Deep underground, Korath was using every system at his disposal to prevent both fleets from attacking, but his efforts were having an unexpected side effect. The interference was causing feedback in the containment systems. Warning alarms began sounding throughout the facility. The Eternal Sleeper was responding to all the electromagnetic activity. Its containment field strength dropped to 40%. "Guardian," Kyung said urgently. "What's happening?" "The creature is feeding on the chaos," Korath replied. "Every conflict, every act of aggression makes it stronger. Your battle in space awakened it. Now the electromagnetic interference is accelerating the process." Through the facility's sensors, they could feel something stirring in the deepest chamber, something vast and angry that had been forced to sleep for millennia. "How do we stop it?" Gina asked. "The containment can be renewed," Korath said, "but it requires a tremendous sacrifice. My people gave their lives to create the original prison. They converted their life force into energy to power the containment field, and if we don't renew it, then the Eternal Sleeper will break free. It will consume this world, then spread to the stars. It will feed on every conflict, every war, growing stronger until it devours the entire galaxy." The humans exchanged worried glances. In space above, both fleets were still maneuvering for position, unaware of the danger they were all in. "Can you contact our ship?" Kyung asked. "Warn them?" "I am trying," Korath replied. "But the interference is too strong now, and even if I could reach them, would they believe?" Private Sunho had been quiet during the exchange, but now he spoke up. "What about the Vorthax? Can you make them understand?" "Perhaps. But they seek to claim this technology as a weapon. They will not simply leave." Suddenly the facility shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling and several of the crystal displays flickered. "What was that?" Doki asked. Korath's expression grew even more worried. "Vorthak bombardment. They are trying to blast their way to the energy source, but they do not understand what they are doing." The Guardian accessed his deepest sensors, and his worst fears were confirmed. The bombardment had damaged more containment systems. Field strength was now at 30% and falling rapidly. "It is too late to evacuate," he said grimly. "The creature can now influence minds at the surface level. Soon it will be able to reshape reality itself." As if to prove his point, the walls around them began to change color. The geometric patterns in the stone started moving, flowing like liquid metal. The air grew thick and hard to breathe. "What's happening to us?" Gina gasped. "The Eternal Sleeper is testing its power," Korath explained. "It is still weak, but growing stronger every moment." Through the facility's communication system, they could hear strange sounds, whispers in languages that had never existed, screams of rage that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "How long do we have?" Kyung asked. Korath checked his readings one more time. "At the current rate of degradation, perhaps 6 hours before total containment failure. Then we need to get everyone off the planet." "Impossible. The Eternal Sleeper will not allow it. It wants all the life force it can absorb when it breaks free." The Guardian looked at each of the humans in turn. "There is only one hope. If enough beings willingly sacrifice themselves to power the containment field, the creature can be forced back to sleep." "How many?" Gina asked quietly. "My entire civilization numbered in the billions, but your species may be different. Human neural patterns are unlike anything I have encountered. You might be able to maintain the prison with far fewer numbers." The facility shook again as more Vorthak bombardment struck the surface. In the deepest chamber, something that had slept for 50,000 years was almost ready to wake up, and when it did, the real nightmare would begin. The moment the containment field dropped below 30%, reality began to break down. Sergeant Kyung watched in horror as the walls around them started to melt and reform like clay. The stone flowed upward in impossible spirals, defying gravity and logic. The air itself seemed to thicken, becoming hard to breathe. "What is that?" Private Doki whispered, pointing at something moving in the shadows. A shape that wasn't quite there flickered at the edge of their vision. It looked like a person, but wrong somehow. Too tall, with too many arms and eyes that glowed with hungry light. An echo, Korath said grimly. The eternal sleeper is dreaming, and its dreams are becoming real. The Guardian's form flickered as the energy systems throughout the facility became unstable. The creature is fully conscious now. I can feel its rage. 50,000 years of forced sleep have only made it more angry. In space above, both fleets were experiencing the same reality distortions. Captain Ji-won gripped her command chair as the soul's pride shuddered, not from weapons fire but from something far stranger. "Captain," sensor operator Hana called out, her voice shaking. "The planet is changing. I'm reading impossible energy, spikes, and the gravitational field is fluctuating." Through the view screen, they could see the planet's surface rippling like water. Mountains moved and shifted. The brown landscape turned black, then red, then colors that had no names. "What's happening down there?" Lieutenant Minho asked. Before anyone could answer, their own ship began to change. The metal walls started to flow and bend. Control panels melted and reformed into strange shapes that almost looked like faces. "Engineering to bridge," came Do-yun's panicked voice. "The reactor core is acting like it's alive. The containment field is holding. But the whole engine room looks like something out of a nightmare." On the Vorthak command ship, War Commander Thexhai was facing the same impossible situation. His warriors were tough fighters, but they had never dealt with reality itself turning against them. "Science officer," he barked. "Explain what is happening." The science officer looked up from his console with terror in his multiple eyes. "War Commander, our instruments show that space-time itself is becoming unstable around the planet. Whatever is down there, it's powerful enough to change the laws of physics." Deep in the facility, Korath was fighting a losing battle against systems that no longer obeyed their programming. The Eternal Sleeper's influence was spreading through every circuit, every crystal, every piece of ancient technology. "I can maintain communication for only a few more minutes," he told the humans. "After that, the creature will control everything in the facility." "Tell us what we need to do," Kyung said firmly. "The containment chamber is 3 levels below us. The control systems are still partially functional, but someone will need to operate them manually." "What kind of someone?" Medic Gina asked. "Living beings. The containment field feeds on life force. It requires conscious will, freely given, to maintain the prison." Private Sunho had been listening to his communication equipment, trying to raise the fleet. Now he looked up with a pale face. "I'm getting reports from the ships. Both human and Vorthak vessels are experiencing the same distortions we are. Some crews are reporting that their dead crewmates are walking the corridors." Korath nodded, sadly. "The creature feeds on death as well as life. Every being that dies while under its influence becomes part of its power." The facility shook again, but this time it wasn't from bombardment. Something was moving in the deepest levels. Something huge that was testing the boundaries of its prison. "How much time do we have?" Kyung asked. "Minutes, perhaps less. The final containment barriers are failing." Through the communication system, they could hear a sound that made their teeth ache. It was like metal grinding against metal, but also like screaming, and like the sound of breaking glass. It was the voice of something that should not exist. "We need to contact the fleets," Gina said. "Get them to work together." "Impossible," Korath replied. "The creature's influence extends into space now. It will turn them against each other, feeding on their conflict." As if to prove his point, they heard weapons fire from above. The human and Vorthak fleets had begun attacking each other again, their crews driven mad by the Eternal Sleeper's psychic pressure. "No," Kyung said firmly. "There has to be another way." He activated his communicator, hoping it would still work. To his surprise, he got through to the soul's pride. "Captain Ji-won, this is Kyung. Can you hear me?" Ji-won's voice came through, the static, strained but clear. "I hear you, Sergeant. What's your situation?" "Bad, and getting worse. Captain, I need you to contact the Vorthak commander. Tell him we need to work together or we're all going to die." "Work with the Vorthaks? They're shooting at us." "Then make them stop. There's something down here that's worse than any war. It's going to destroy everything if we don't cooperate." There was a long pause. Then Ji-won's voice came back. "What do you need us to do?" Before Kyung could answer, the communication system was flooded with the sound of the Eternal Sleeper's voice. It spoke in a language that was older than stars, but somehow they all understood it. "Finally," it said, and the word carried the weight of 50,000 years of rage. "Finally, I am free to reclaim what was stolen from me." The facility around them began to dissolve. Walls became transparent, showing the creature's true prison far below. It was a sphere of pure energy, but cracks were spreading across its surface like a breaking egg. "The final barriers are failing," Korath shouted over the psychic screaming. "We have perhaps minutes before complete containment failure." Through the transparent walls, they could see the thing at the center of the prison. It wasn't quite physical, and wasn't quite energy. It was something that existed in the spaces between thoughts, in the darkness between stars. Looking at it directly made their minds hurt. "How do we fight something like that?" Doki asked, his voice barely a whisper. "We don't fight it," Korath said. "We contain it. But the process requires willing sacrifice, enough life force to power the prison for another age." "How much life force?" Kyung asked. "Originally my entire species, billions of beings. But human minds are different, more flexible, more resistant to psychic influence. You might be able to maintain the containment with far fewer numbers." "How many?" "I estimate perhaps 50 conscious minds, working together in perfect harmony." Kyung looked at his small squad. 4 humans against a creature that had destroyed an entire galactic civilization. The odds were impossible. But then his communicator crackled to life again. This time it was Captain Ji-won, and she sounded different, determined. "Sergeant, I've made contact with the Vorthak commander. He's agreed to a temporary ceasefire. His ships are experiencing the same reality distortions we are. He wants to know what we're dealing with." "A planet killer," Kyung replied. "Maybe a galaxy killer. We need volunteers, Captain. People willing to risk everything to keep this thing contained." "How many volunteers?" "About 50. And they need to get down here fast, before the prison fails completely." Through the facility's sensors, they could feel the Eternal Sleeper pressing against its weakening bonds. The creature's rage was like a physical force, making the air hard to breathe and thoughts hard to form. "Captain," Kyung said urgently, "we're running out of time. Can you and the Vorthaks put aside your differences long enough to save the galaxy?" There was another pause. Then Ji-won's voice came back, steady and strong. "Consider it done, Sergeant. Help is on the way." In the deepest chamber, the last containment barrier was beginning to crack. Light leaked through the gaps, but it wasn't normal light. It was the kind of illumination that came from dying stars and broken hopes. The Eternal Sleeper was almost free, and when it broke loose completely, the real battle would begin. Captain Ji-won had never thought she would die alongside her enemies. But as the shuttle bay doors opened to reveal Vorthak warriors standing next to human marines, she realized some things were more important than old grudges. War Commander Thexhai stepped forward, his forearms crossed in what she hoped was a gesture of respect rather than threat. His translation device crackled as he spoke. "Human captain, my ships report impossible things. Dead crew walking, walls that bleed. Reality itself is sick." "I know," Ji-won replied. "My people on the surface say there's something ancient down there. Something that wants to destroy everything." "Then we fight together?" Ji-won looked into his alien eyes and saw the same determination she felt. "We fight together." The mixed group of 50 volunteers moved through the facility's corridors as reality continued to break down around them. The walls showed scenes from worlds that had never existed. The air tasted of colors that had no names. With each step deeper into the complex, the normal laws of physics mattered less. Korath met them at the entrance to the containment chamber. The ancient guardian looked even more metallic now, as if the Eternal Sleeper's influence was forcing him to become more machine than organic. "You came," he said, and there was surprise in his voice. "Enemies working together. I did not think it possible." "Neither did we," Ji-won admitted. "But some threats are bigger than our wars." The guardian led them to a circular chamber filled with control stations. Each station glowed with soft light, waiting for an operator. In the center of the room was a viewing portal that showed the prison far below. The Eternal Sleeper was almost free. The energy sphere that had contained it for 50,000 years was covered in cracks. Through the gaps, something that hurt to look at was pushing toward freedom. The process is simple but irreversible, Korath explained. Each of you will link your mind to the containment system. Your life force will become part of the prison's power source. You will live, but you will never be able to leave this place. What about our ships? Asked Lieutenant Minho. They will be free to go once the creature is contained again. The psychic influence does not extend beyond this world's atmosphere. War Commander, HFY studied the control stations. How long must we remain? Until another civilization develops the technology to take your place. Perhaps 1,000 years. Perhaps 10,000. The volunteers looked at each other. Humans and Vorthax, who had been trying to kill each other an hour ago, now faced an eternity of shared guardianship. There is something else, Korath continued. Human neural patterns are different from mine. You may be able to maintain the prison more efficiently, but the process will change you, as it changed me. Over time, you will become more like the technology you guard. Sergeant Kyung stepped forward. Will we still be ourselves? Yes, but enhanced. Your minds will expand to hold knowledge no organic brain could contain. Your bodies will adapt to serve the mission. You will become something new. The facility shook violently as another crack appeared in the containment sphere. The Eternal Sleeper's rage was like a physical force now, making the air thick and hard to breathe. We're out of time, Jiwan said. Everyone take a position. The 50 volunteers spread out among the control stations. Humans and Vorthax worked side by side, their hands hovering over controls they didn't fully understand. When I give the signal, Korath said, place your hands on the neural interfaces. The system will do the rest. Through the viewing portal, they watched the final barriers cracking. Light that wasn't light leaked through the gaps. In that terrible illumination, they could see the shape of something that should not exist. Now! Korath shouted. 50 hands pressed against 50 interfaces. The neural connection was instant and overwhelming. Jiwon felt her mind expand beyond her skull, linking with the others in a network of shared consciousness. She could feel Minho's determination, Thexhai's fierce courage, Kyung's protective instincts, all of them, human and Vorthak alike, united in purpose. Power flowed through the network and into the containment systems. New barriers formed around the Eternal Sleeper, stronger than the old ones. The creature's rage pressed against the prison, but it could not break free. The psychic screaming gradually faded. Reality stopped shifting and breaking. The laws of physics reasserted themselves throughout the facility. It is done, Korath said, and his voice carried 50,000 years of relief. The creature sleeps again, but the cost was clear. The 50 volunteers could feel the change beginning in their bodies. Their flesh was becoming more resilient, their minds more capable of processing vast amounts of information. They were becoming guardians, like Korath. How do you feel? The ancient being asked. Jiwan tested her new senses. She could feel every system in the facility, every fluctuation in the containment field. She was still herself, but more than herself. Different, she said, but still human. And I am still Vorthak, Thexhai added, but we are also something new. Through their shared network, they could sense the space battle ending above. The psychic influence was gone, and the remaining ships were withdrawing to safe distances. What happens now? Asked Medic Gina. Now we wait, Korath replied. We guard. We ensure that the galaxy remains safe from what sleeps below. Together, Kyung added, looking around at his mixed group of humans and Vorthax. Enemies who became allies. Over the following days, as the news of what had happened spread through both fleets, something unprecedented occurred. The two species, who had been at war for decades, began talking about peace. The sacrifice of the 50 Guardians had shown both sides that some things were more important than conquest or territory. The galaxy was a dangerous place, full of ancient threats that could only be faced by working together. A treaty was signed in the space above Kepler 442c. The planet became neutral ground, jointly protected by both species. Ships from both fleets would take turns patrolling the system, ensuring that no one disturbed the Guardians in their eternal watch. Deep in the facility, the 50 volunteers adapted to their new existence. They learned to share their consciousness across the network while maintaining their individual identities. They studied the ancient technology and gradually understood the true scope of what they protected. The Eternal Sleeper was just one of many such creatures scattered across the galaxy. Most were still safely contained, but some prisons had failed over the millennia. The Guardians' mission would not end with this one world. "We'll need to contact other species," Jiwan said during one of their mental conferences. "Warn them about the dangers. Help them prepare." "Yes," agreed Thexhai. "The galaxy is large, but these threats are everywhere. We cannot guard everything ourselves." Korath, no longer alone after 50,000 years, helped them plan. The ancient Guardian shared his knowledge of other containment sites, other sleeping horrors that must never be allowed to wake. Years passed. The Guardians aged slowly, their enhanced bodies lasting far longer than normal biology would allow. They watched as their two species gradually moved from ceasefire to cooperation to genuine alliance. New volunteers sometimes came to join them, from both species and others that had learned of their mission. The network grew stronger with each addition, creating a force capable of protecting the galaxy from threats beyond imagination. And in the deepest chamber, the Eternal Sleeper remained trapped in its prison of living will. The creature still raged and plotted, but it could not break free. The Guardian's sacrifice had bought the galaxy time to grow stronger, to prepare for other ancient evils that might one day wake. The price had been high. 50 individuals had given up their normal lives to become something more. But in return, billions of beings across the stars could sleep peacefully, never knowing how close they had come to annihilation. In the end, that was enough. The Guardians had chosen their path willingly, and they would walk it together until the galaxy no longer needed their protection. Some prices were worth paying to keep tomorrow safe.